Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. Be a part of the show by calling 915-544-KTSM, 915-544-5876, or comment online on our stream at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. It's 4 p.m. Mountain Time, and that means it's time to talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages. We're up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. And of course, Talk El Paso brought to you in part by Sunland Park Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram Fiat. Find them online at Sunland Park Jeep Chrysler Dodge Ram.net, or just head over to 950 Crockett Street and find them right across from Sunland Park Mall across I-10. Amber Banda already chiming in over on the social media with the rock on. Appreciate that, as we also have those dropping those likes and reacts already, including a Flaco Jimenez and Amber as well. So that's a demonstration of how you can get at us throughout the show. We got another jam-packed one for you today, literally having to jam it in as we're trying to get more of the substantive as much as we're going to be able to display on air, to be honest with you, from the deep dive, swan dive into the deep end of the issues involving Prop K, from not just even the proponents, but the actual authors of some of what is being written there. So still continuing going in through that. All of what is written within the ordinance, that roughly 10 pages that culminates in that roughly 450 words that will appear on the ballot. Yeah, continuing that for day 2 today with some more of the questions, both on some that y'all had, including climate justice and what that means, again, in the proponents and authors' own words, and then also some of the studies, the back and forth, the analysis that has been coming out about that, what that perspective is on the costs. And again, getting some of y'all's questions as well. So continuing that today, but we got a lot more to get into today as well, even as we, again, try to cram in a bunch here, including big charges related to the Juarez Immigration Detention Center fire that claimed dozens of lives, injured dozens more, and is now looking at top-level government officials now facing a potential prosecution related to maybe not direct actions, maybe the lack thereof, as a matter of fact. Also, more on what will be going on with the El Paso streetcar coming out of the city council meeting yesterday. The study is being ordered and what some of the particulars being looked at are, as well as, of course, Texas legislature keeping our eye on that. At least one more set of bills, including death benefits, potential for state troopers, not state troopers, but troops in the state that were part of Operation Lone Star, as well as potential movement on a expanded medical marijuana access in the state of Texas, which is just kind of personally interesting, but we'll talk more about that, as well as other drug actions, as much as we can squeeze in the time for. But this will be a short first segment as we get straight into our interview. So yeah, from our news partners at KFOX 14, Mexican Immigration Agency chief to be charged in fatal fire. And also sourced out of the Associated Press out of Mexico City. Specifically, it is being said that now that Francisco Garduño, head of Mexico's National Immigration Institute, is going to be having charges filed against him in that fire that ended up killing at least 40 in Juarez last month. And among other things, of course, there's been at least 5 or 6 that have been announced to be prosecuted so far, but those were all primarily on the local level, and there had been a lot of international pressure in order to have, well, a lot more done with this and not let this just be this happened in one way. International outcry, among other things, has been going on this. Today, President of Mexico, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, affectionately Yish, known as AMLO, said that even though the Attorney General office was investigating Garduño, prosecutors had revealed few details, and it was not exactly clear what they would charge him with. So those are a few of the things going on right now there. And if you're having any trouble getting a note over on our social media, having trouble with the audio, try refreshing, because everything should be going out. In any case, also a little bit more close to home, I guess you could say, or impacting those immediately in our broadcast area. The El Paso streetcar. We've been having a lot of discussion this week ever since it became clear that it was going to be a subject of city council. And so no immediate action being taken, but there are certain, again, concepts on the chopping block. What has been ordered as of the most recent city council meeting for El Paso is of a feasibility study, an economic analysis being done. El Paso Matters has a decent deep dive into some of the numbers about what ridership and what use has been in recent years, let's put it that way, noting among other things that in 2018, the fiscal year, November 2018 to August 2019, that the streetcar saw about 220,000 riders in that year, specifically according to Deputy City Manager Tracy Jerome. But that did dip into 2020 when it only ran for 6 months, among other things. And then in subsequent years saw as little as 5,000 passengers and change. Fiscal year 2021, which, I mean, it was only open for 2 months, to be fair. And that the last fiscal year, noted by El Paso Matters, only the second year that the trolley or streetcar, I keep calling it trolley because that's what's in my mind, streetcar operated for a full 12 months at about 47,000 riders, but the schedule was also pretty limited, among other things. So some of the questions I'd had about when it is even available: runs 3 to 10 p.m. Wednesday through Saturday and from noon to 6 p.m. Sunday, according to city information. And there was an anticipation of there being 84,000 this fiscal year, but some of those questions about is it still viable, useful, etc., particularly since it is free right now. There were originally some fees to use it. At the very beginning, it was free and then became something where it was you then had to, I think, about $1.50 in order to do it. So those are some of the feasibility things. Again, Mayor Scaliser, who put the item on the agenda, not calling for the immediate acts of it, to be fair. He's calling for, and what the action that has now been voted on will be to do a study on it to see what kind of possibilities there can be and can be done. Again, city staff directed to conduct an economic impact study, assess the economic development along the streetcar's 4.8-mile route, and determine the impact that different operating hours would have on access to public transportation in the downtown and uptown/UTEP areas. The reps voting against the motion to do that were Brian Kennedy and Alessandra Anello. And so this information will be coming back up in about 3 months. So we'll see what ends up coming up with that. But there's a lot more possibilities there. And also, just as a note on the streets, apparently we've got some deer, particularly near Festival, North Mesa, early this morning. About 9:40, 5 deer running down Mesa. So just remember, we do kind of surround a mountain sometimes, folks. So always be careful of those deer out there. Might think that they don't show up that often, and then you'll see a little bit of roadkill, and hopefully you didn't cause it yourself. Anyway, those are a couple of things I want to mention, but we got to take that first break already right now because we got to get into the rest of the interview, trying to present a couple more substantive blocks of, again, input from the organizers and even writers of Prop K on what it is and what they see as the purpose of it, and also asking some of y'all's questions and the questions I've had on how this would happen and take place. So we're going to take that first break right now. You are tuned into Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. Back after this break with more, a lot more that we'll be talking about today. So you're locked in for Talk El Paso on News Radio 690 KTSM. Don't go anywhere.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
I-10 slow with some minor delays eastbound from Cotton to Paisano, 5-minute delays there. I-10 westbound at Lee Trevino, a truck is blocking the right shoulder. Police responding to a crash northbound Dyer at Hondo Pass. Slow traffic, Artcraft from the state line over to the 10 Desert Boulevard, 11-minute delays. And northbound Zaragoza slow from the Loop to Montana Avenue. That's a 9-minute delay. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
How could $1,000 change your life?
I could buy eggs.
Then listen for inflation compensation. Your chance to win $1,000 to combat high prices.
Honey, we're going to have eggs.
Yes, it's excellent. Be listening for your chance to win $1,000 with inflation compensation.
Listen for your chance to win $1,000 every hour, 9 through 5 p. with the inflation compensation on News Radio 690 AM. Brought to you by Charlie Clark Nissan and Charlie Clark Infinity of El Paso.
This report is sponsored by Red Pilled America.
Are you tired of listening to stories that are saturated with wokeness? If you are, then you should try Red Pilled America. We tell good old-fashioned stories that align with middle America values. Listen to Red Pilled America anywhere you get podcasts. That's Red Pilled America.
I always wanted to learn Spanish, but I never thought I'd have the time. Then I discovered Babbel.
Babbel's lessons are fun. They only take like 10 or 15 minutes, and in 3 weeks, presto, you're starting to speak another language. Like magic.
I love that Babbel's lessons aren't just robots talking. They're voiced by native speakers, so you get the pronunciation just right. And they're designed by real language teachers, so you learn how to have real-world conversations, things you'll actually use.
It's incredible. After using Babbel, I'm ready to start having real conversations in French.
There's all kinds of ways to learn. Use Babbel's podcasts or games or videos. You can even join live classes with a language teacher.
If you want to learn a language, there's no faster, easier, better way than
Babbel.
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 Babbel, évidemment. Go to Babbel.com to try for free. That's Babbel.com. Babbel.com.
Hi, I'm Burt Ward, Robin from TV's Batman, inviting you to feed your dog natural, non-GMO, Gentle Giants dog and puppy food. Dogs eating Gentle Giants and following our special feeding and care program are living as long as 27 healthy, active years with a wonderful quality of life. Holy wow, 27 years! Think of all the extra years you could enjoy with your dog at Target, H-E-B, and stores near you. Try Gentle Giant's cat and kitten food, too.
It can be dangerously easy to steal your identity during tax season because so much sensitive info is all together.
Before we start the annual meeting of Sean's personal info, has anyone seen Social Security number?
Not me.
Nope.
Nuh-uh.
Oh, no. He's been stolen.
LifeLock by Norton makes it easy to help protect yourself. If you become a victim, we'll work to fix it. No one can monitor all transactions, but you can save up to 25% off your first year with promo code NEWS at LifeLock.com. Identity theft protection starts here.
News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various socials, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, either under Talk El Paso or Andrew J. Polk. People tuning in, chiming in there, including those likes and reacts, Javier Maldonado, James Holmes, Blanco Jimenez, and Amber Banda. Pardon me. As also RJ asking about the interview that we're going to continue the second day of playing clips from so far today. This week anyway, of the full interview that we have with the, folks behind the Prop K, the El Paso Climate Charter proposal that is going to be, again, on the ballots. And RJ asking, is the whole interview available yet? It is set to finally be up on YouTube, basically right after we're off air today, 6:30. So we'll, as soon as that links up, we'll cross-post it over on the Facebook. It's been a bit of a bear getting it up. But in any case, continuing on today, so we had gotten into a lot of the specifics with both how this item came about and some of the questions y'all had and that I've had, frankly, when it comes to the technical aspects of it. But now into at least one question that was asked yesterday, and we did get to within the interview itself here, again, recorded yesterday morning, on like climate justice, those concepts and how it applies to it's one of the things that is provided in the definitions at the start of the item, of the whole list of it. But also there's the concept and how they apply to the rest of it. That's a very interesting answer. So continuing on with the interview now. So you're going to be hearing first from Veronica Carvajal, president of Justicia Fronteriza, but also joining there were Dominic Jacon with Sunrise El Paso and Christian Marquardt with El Paso Climate Charter Coalition. So continuation of that interview now. Enjoy.
I believe the question is about climate justice and environmental justice communities.
Yeah, certainly. Basically, that definition, how it's not necessarily explicitly mentioned in all of the rest of the items, certainly not in all of them, in certain ones of them, but then just how that concept essentially informs the rest of it and how you see that impact of that concept within the document as a whole.
Well, I think that the document as a whole is forcing all of us to, especially our city officials, to look at decisions through the lens of those who are most impacted by issues related to climate injustice. And when we can call them frontline or fence line communities, and that's a legal term. The fence line communities have standing before, for instance, a TCQ when it comes to an air permit in fighting, polluters like El Paso Electric. And often we don't think about them. We get in our cars and we drive past them, but these communities are impacted not just by the power plant, but also the refinery, by transportation projects, by the Bridge of the Americas, expansion. And we need to start thinking about them because they're the canaries in the mine. They're the folks that are dealing with not only the pollution, but also the traffic that comes from these facilities. And they're often the least equipped to deal with the health consequences. So they have paid a very high price with the quality of their life, as well as their own health bills and medical bills and other expenses related to, them breathing in polluted air, as well as contending with the noise, as well as contending with the depreciation in their property values because they're next to these facilities. And so, in El Paso, we talk a lot about property taxes and jobs, but if we're able to, at some point, take over the power plant, we have to remember that would be a source of revenue, right? There's a reason that El Paso Electric shareholders did not voluntarily give us sell us or just offer us up the plant. It's because it's a profit generating endeavor. And so we need that. El Pasoans have very high property taxes because we don't have other sources of revenue. And the utility that we do own, the water utility, is the most expensive to operate because we're in the desert. And so we have to really start thinking about what this means for the future of our local economy, as well as it has been spoken about throughout the program, the need to gain control over the kind of electricity that is generated and how it's generated.
Okay, so again, that's Veronica Carbajal, president of Justicia Fronteriza. And so going back now into some of the analysis, I think that we've covered most of the major points that have come up on this program anyway, when it relates to the climate charter, some of the actual specific provisions within it, at the very least, again, displayed to us and presented to me. I'm sure there's a lot more questions and analysis that exist out there, but those are some of the major ones. Now, in some of the analysis that has come out about all of this and how it will then have an impact on there's, of course, as you mentioned, Dominic, the study that was done by Moscow Consulting out of Idaho that puts the actual cost of this then I do believe at a whole lot more. And I think that's Veronica signing off with us. But Christian, you're still with us, yes?
Oh, and actually, Andrew, I'm going to have to sign off as well.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us as well. We'll be continuing on that conversation, but you have a good one there.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye.
Thank you. So continuing on with Dominic now. So, of course, there's been a lot of analysis, meta-analysis back and forth on these things. One of the first major ones coming out earlier this year was, of course, that actual study put out on behalf of the El Paso Chamber saying that about $170,000, 170,000 jobs, rather, and about $8 billion between now and 2030, specifically referencing the El Paso Matters reporting on this from the article dated February 23rd, 2023. Climate charter could cost thousands of jobs, billions in earnings, Chamber says. Subtitled, Environmentalists Who Petitions for the Climate Policy to Appear on the May ballot calls El Paso Chamber's claim fear-mongering, just the full title and subtitle for it as well. Yeah, the climate study, among other things, the one that, again, done by the Chamber, that is, again, 170,000 job lost, $8 billion in workers' earnings lost. If implemented in their analysis, as they put it, included in those kind of things, it's a roughly 60-page document, give or take, so it goes quite in depth on it. And essentially what has also been said, including to El Paso Matters, and I'm going to quote directly from this there on the actual consultants who ended up producing this. I do have that quote here. What they said is that this is what the cost would be as their flat analysis of it on if there were to be a immediate move towards all of these things, including the cost of creating some of this power generation, the cost of purchasing El Paso Electric, or of the cost of removing the power generation facilities without replacement. That's where I think the bulk of that job loss and economic impact, the wage loss that comes with it, is from the idea of that power generation, any of the fossil fuel industry ones being cut and not replaced effectively, and the impact that would have on essentially availability within the El Paso grid. Now, of course, the El Paso Climate Charter Group, as well as the El Paso Climate Charter Coalition, as well as Sunrise El Paso, you all have responded and said that essentially no, that this would not be a move directly towards that. In a nutshell, in your own words, what is y'all's response actually to that study? We've discussed the study previously, and some of your response, including kind of a line by line response to it, but kind of in a nutshell and at that high level, what is y'all's response to it?
I mean, short answer is corporations lie. We can look at the tobacco industry, right? In the 80s, when they were being held accountable for the fact that their product was producing cancer and killing people. Lied until they were finally forced to admit, right? Same thing in ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil knew for a long time that their product was creating carbon emissions that were altering the climate, and they just simply lied. This should not be viewed as anything else but another, layer of those lies. And I think to call it a study is giving it, a little too much credit. A study requires, peer reviewed. A study requires open sourcing of your information and sort of really citing as much information as possible over a long period of time to make sure you get the right information. This was a paid report commissioned by the El Paso Chamber of Commerce once they found out that we were going to get this charter on the ballot. So this is their response to try to come up with something, right? But let's assume that this is a study. Let's assume that this is legit, and like we'll entertain the thought of of how to respond to this. And at the end of the day, I don't think El Paso Electric realizes how much they are actually implicated in this study.
Okay.
What this study really points out is their failure to invest in their own goals that they say they're happening. So let's talk about the electrification, right? While the number is very high, I don't even think it's that high. It is highlighting the fact that they, as $1 billion bank that owns this company, have failed to invest in their electrification, even though that's what they say their goals are, right? They talk about transitioning jobs. But that to me reads as they have failed to train their employees into the new solar energy and renewable energy economy that's coming forward. And so to me, in those two ways, that it kind of implicates them as not investing in these things that they articulate themselves as their goals.
So it's simply what we've talked about, among other things, is that, some of the concerns that have been expressed on this program, among other things, have been the idea of there being, for lack of a better term, or at least I think about it, a bottom dropping out of in order to move only to renewables, we cut off everything else. A kind of
economic fallout, I think is the term that one of them used.
Economic fallout, among other things, or another way to put it, cutting off the nose despite the face. That has come up a couple of times here. Is it the intention of you all to kind of pursue that course, or to essentially be more there are some timelines mentioning 2045 to that 100% renewable or clean renewables, as again is defined in there. So when it comes to there being goals is something that you all have mentioned a lot. Is it the intention and the way that it should be, you all intend to have it interpreted, if again passed and put into the city charter, that something that would reduce the reliability of the grid? There are certain other provisions you have on there on ensuring electrical and other utility access, that if there was being contravention of that, say towards achieving those goals, if there wouldn't to be that facilities or that capability, if there were setbacks, those kind of things, that if, say, we get those deadlines, say the one about the 80% generation by the 2030s, that if that is not able to be achieved, it would not be a too bad, so sad, we got to turn off this other part of it, essentially?
That and their whole assessment in which they get to that doomsday scenario is just inaccurate. On page 11 of the study, and I encourage anybody who can get in front of it to read up to it, is where they predicate their doomsday scenario. Basically, their doomsday scenario comes from what you just said, that no matter how hard we try, we're not going to be able to produce enough solar energy to meet our energy demands. And because of that, as you said, businesses are just going to apparently just devolve. Nobody's going to be able to even that scenario is already a stretch, but the way they get there is completely has nothing to do with anything set by the climate charter. There's a point on page 11 in the bottom where they talk about their moderate solarization rate on the last paragraph. So last paragraph, in our economic impact assessment, we do not assume this lofty solarization pathway for El Paso in the future, and that lofty goal being the one set by the climate charter, which is reach 80% renewable by 2030, and then 100% by 2045. And that rate, we would need 113 megawatts, to be added to our electric grid every year. So that's the rate set by the climate charter. But instead of designing their economic model on that rate that is set by the climate charter, they decided to come up with what they called a more moderate solarization model, which is only 12 megawatts installed per year. So if I can put forth an analogy, it's like saying like, hey, El Paso, we want to get to Dallas, Texas by this time. And if we need to get to there by this time, we need to go 113 miles per hour. I don't recommend anybody travel that fast, but just for the analogy, right? And we're saying that we need to get to 113 miles per hour over every year to get to this destination or close to it, right?
Okay.
El Paso, the Moscow study has, without any sort of explanation, chosen a more moderate solarization model, which is only 12 megawatts per year. And that's like saying we're going to try to get to Dallas at 12 miles per hour. Well, of course, at 12 miles per hour, we're never going to get to our energy demand. We're never going to meet that. And so it's sort of it's a nice study and all, but it's predicated on something that is not in the climate charter. And from there is where they start to paint their whole doomsday scenario, that this is what's going to cause businesses to fall out. This is going to cause these things to happen. And it's just not true. If you go to El Paso Electric on their own website, they're saying that they can add up to 700 by I think it was 2025, which is way faster than the climate charter. But again, we don't know where this 12 megawatts installed per year comes from. But this is just an example of how these corporations produce a really complicated, overly unnecessarily complicated document that really just says a whole lot of nothing. At the end of the day, we've talked to Austin economists, and I think El Paso Matters might have interviewed them too, and very clearly said these are goals that already exist in other Texas cities. These are goals that are very reasonable to achieve. Are they going to be completely easy and a walk in the park? Absolutely not, but they are achievable. But rather than engage in the substantive conversation, the El Paso Chamber of Commerce and El Paso Electric choose to fearmonger and choose to really lie and manipulate information and manipulate data to make it seem as though it's impossible, even though they say themselves this is where they're trying to go as a business. So it's really hard to engage in these conversations in good faith, and to ask ourselves, what does this all mean at the end of the day? For another example is they price El Paso Electric at somewhere close to $9 billion that we would have to buy. I mean, I don't think anybody needs to be economists, but how would we get from $4.3 billion in 2018 to $9 billion in whatever year they're saying, you know? That is a huge just assumption at the end of the day. I get that may be how they internally want to value their company, but it's not based on any assessment. They're not saying this is our grid that we have. This is what we can do, is what we can't do. All they are saying is this is what we can't do. And that's to be expected of an industry who has a monopoly over a region.
There's more points I want to get into here, but just specifically on that one, a point that has come up, or a question that's come up about particularly the sale, again, the municipalization, get that you talked about it, and the variety of tools, ways that this could be accomplished. But from the sale aspect of it, I mean, it is a now privately held company that may be part of a publicly traded one, but it is owned. It is owned and was purchased, and it's again for that, $4 billion and change. So one of those questions that has come up, particularly on that point, is of the willingness to sell, the willingness of willing to submit to a purchase. I mean, there's a phrase out there, anything is possible if money is no object. But once you start talking about, I mean, we've had enough heartache over hundreds of millions of dollar bonds in this area with voters in recent years. When we start talking about that kind of a chunk of change and being willing to achieve it, and I get the importance and the distinction that you all are making between a regular bond project and the ones that have regularly gone on, or like say the arena, etc., and this as being of paramount importance, but giving the willingness of the community and the fact that it may not be considered as for sale except for such an exorbitant type of price. I guess, how do y'all respond to that concept of, again, all available efforts does not necessarily require it to be done in any kind of immediate time frame, but if these are the kind of roadblocks that are in the way, what is really the feasibility of doing that in the long run for anything besides maybe even tens of billions of dollars.
Again, it goes back to that point I had us like go back to, is that electricity is a human right. You need electricity to live, right? If somebody owned the water in El Paso and simply didn't want to sell it, that's not the role of city government. The role of city government is to ensure that we have all the things that we need to live a dignified life, to live with all the things that we need. Electricity is one of those things. And so from my perspective, and I say this as a young organizer who's been organizing in El Paso for 13 years, is it reads to me as they called us irresponsible, right, for not doing an economic assessment for a climate charter. I think their inability to engage in this honest conversation in a substantive way is what's really irresponsible, right? Just if they didn't want to sell their company, which it sounds like that's what they are going for, that should reveal to us their true intentions, right? They're not intent on providing electricity to the community because we need it, right? They're in the business of making money. And if they can make money by selling to fossil fuels and neglecting our utility ratepayers, which they have, right? They're going to continue to do that. They're going to continue to prioritize all the money they can.
We're going to go ahead and take that next break right now. We got more of this interview to come up here. We're just trying to squeeze in what we can, but we also will have the full interview posted pretty much right after the show today. So taking that next break right now, you are tuned in to Talk El Paso on News Radio 690 KTSM. Back after this break with more. Stay tuned.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Hello, I'm Erica Castillo with this KFOX 14 news update. A man is now booked into the El Paso County Jail in connection to the murder of a woman in El Paso missing 2 weeks ago. 34-year-old Christopher Paul Maya was arrested yesterday at a Walmart in the Northeast by the U.S. Marshals Lone Star Fugitive Task Force. The 32-year-old's body was found in the area of Red Sands. Police say the last contact with Michelle Morales Nakaza was the night of March 27th at a Baskin Robbins on Edgemere. Police mentioned Morales Nakaza doesn't own a vehicle and was possibly picked up in a white older Toyota Camry. And Mexico's top immigration official will face criminal charges in the fire that killed 40 migrants in Juarez 2 weeks ago. Federal prosecutors say he was remiss in not preventing the disaster despite earlier indications of problems at the detention centers. It follows repeated calls from within Mexico and Central American nations not to stop the case at the 5 low-level official guards and a Venezuelan migrant already facing homicide charges in the case. I'm Erica Castillo with this KFOX 14 News Update.
News Radio 690. Traffic all day.
From the KFOX 14 Severe Weather Center, I'm Chief Meteorologist Brad Montgomery. After a very warm one for our Wednesday, lows for a Thursday morning in the 50s to lower 60s, so a little milder tomorrow morning. And then for tomorrow afternoon, the story becomes the wind. We'll see southwest winds 30 to 40 miles per hour for your Thursday, high around 84 degrees. Windy and cooler for your Friday, high around 76. The good news is less windy for the weekend. From the KFOX 14 Severe Weather Center, I'm Chief Meteorologist Brad Montgomery.
This report is sponsored by Discover.
When you think Wendy's Biggie Bag, think your go-to meal deal with your choice of JBC, double stack or crispy chicken sandwich, plus 4-piece nugs, junior fries, and a small soft drink. Biggie hits every time. So grab a Biggie Bag today. U.S. price and participation may vary. Third-party delivery pricing may be higher.
If you're hiring, it can feel like you're trying to find a needle in a haystack. You can hope the right person comes along, or you can just use ZipRecruiter. And now you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/radio. In fact, ZipRecruiter has helped a lot of business owners find their needle in a haystack, like Marco, president of operations at Telly Tires and Auto Centers. Because Telly Tires has grown a lot in the last few years, Marco needed to hire everyone from a receptionist to a store manager to a head mechanic.
ZipRecruiter helps me find all the right people, even the most difficult jobs to fill. ZipRecruiter helps me keep my business running.
Take it from Marco and millions of other businesses who've used ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter can help you find the needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ZipRecruiter.com/radio. That's ZipRecruiter.com/RADIO. ZipRecruiter.com/radio. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
For the local issues and discussion you won't get anywhere else, turn to Talk El Paso, weekdays at 4 right here on News Radio 690 KTSM, brought to you in part by the El Paso Community Foundation. Sound off on what matters to you, Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 p.m., and let's talk El Paso.
Coming up on the next episode of the Tudor Dixon podcast, why is the left so eager to push the trans agenda on our kids? Don't miss the eye-opening episode with Yaku Boyens. Catch the Tudor Dixon podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This report is sponsored by the Tudor Dixon podcast.
News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I am your host, Andrew J. Polk. We're going to try to cram in the last part of this interview, the last part that we're airing on for us today when it comes to the Proposition K from the organizers and drafters of the language. We had an in-depth, more than 2-hour interview, and we're bringing to you some of the, maybe not exactly highlights, but most significant parts that at least are close to each other anyway. And we're going to be having that full interview online on the YouTube, basically right after we have this program end today. 6:30 is the scheduled time for it to upload finally to YouTube. After wrangling with that for all today. And it does have all the resources we're talking about it, including all the stories that we end up referencing from, say, primarily El Paso matters, but some of those other items, including the ballot items themselves here. So getting into the last part of that interview, continuing on with, again, the Sunrise El Paso folks, Dominic Chacon, still in studio with me, and we do have the video for this part, so enjoy. So when it comes to that particular study, that specific aspect of what it would mean for the city's bottom line over the next, again, through 2045, what is y'all's response or analysis of that?
We think that that's great. That's what we're wanting, right? Is these assessments to be like, how much is it really going to cost? How much do we think we can really need? How much do we really think we can act within a certain timeline? And if anything, I think that really shows that the numbers within this Moscow study that's being cited by the Chamber of Commerce are inflated, right? Because it's not going
completely different scopes we're talking about here. One would be not even just the government of El Paso, which is the $150 million, the analysis done by, again, the Points Consulting out of Moscow, Idaho, is of the entire economic impact. And I guess essentially the way I see it is that theirs is of the potential for the bottom falling out, and what you all are essentially in response to that study is that no, this would be reasonable. Is that kind of a, in a nutshell, kind of response that you all have to it?
We're saying that the fallout that they're describing is completely fabricated.
That you all would be reasonable to avoid that, essentially, in the implementation.
It's not even that it's avoidable. It's just it would not exist. You know what I mean? The doomsday scenario that they are wanting to paint is just from their fever dreams of losing their own profits, right? They're not concerned with the profits or the pocketbooks of everyday El Pasoans. Their assessment of the money that they're going to lose and the bottom falling out is simply for them as a fossil fuel industry. So when they say we are going to lose profits, they're not talking about everyday El Pasoans. They're talking about themselves and the industries that they represent. The feasibility study from the city of El Paso,
the $150 million,
is a much more reasonable feasibility study. Is it going to cost money to put together resources and to put together staff and make sure we hire the best? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, those investments are going towards the community for community input and for community to receive the benefits of that investment. Whereas as the other assessments and studies, quote, studies done by the Chamber of Commerce and their consultants are simply to spread misinformation and disinformation.
So do you all find yourself agreeing with that city of El Paso analysis that, again, $150 million, more or less all told, except for the full municipalization of El Paso Electric between now and 2045?
We agree that, we accept it as a study that was done. We definitely think that there are more studies that can be done that should show different ones. But we think $150 million to invest in a climate department and a climate director are very reasonable budgets within the city.
Yeah, some of the stuff that, among other things, you all been putting out on social media is saying that this would cost, once implemented and fully up to speed, about $5 million a year. Is that the kind of figure that you all have come down to of what this addition to the charter would actually add to, like, essentially the bottom line for the city of El Paso?
Yeah, it's hard to say because, as Veto had mentioned earlier, electric generation in this area is a very fruitful income. It can generate a lot of money.
Sure.
Right.
Okay.
And so so by us owning and municipalizing a certain aspect of that grid for ourselves, we would be able to, it would pay for itself after so many years, after we expand it to a certain level. And this is something we discussed in the Regional Renewable Energy Advisory Committee. As we continue, the technology continues to develop, solar energy and wind energy and these renewable energy grids become more and more feasible, because they become more and more inexpensive, more accessible for people to be using on a regular basis. And so if we started now, we have to put up a little bit of front of money to get that infrastructure. But in the long run, it would pay for itself and then some. And so that's the thing. And so the whole 150 for the climate department and to get that sort of basic infrastructure makes sense, but it's an investment that will pay off.
Okay. And again, one of the finer points of that and of the analysis the city has put out of those costs include basically $12 to $15 million included with that, of doing 2-part feasibility studies for the municipalization of El Paso Electric specifically. So outside of, also included there, they don't refer to it as municipalization. I get what you're referring to it there about increasing municipal generation is an aspect of municipalization. But in the analysis and the way the city of El Paso has put this forth, and some of this is available over on elpasotexas.gov, among other things, it has that. It would be a 2-part study. The first one, which would take roughly like a year to year and a half, would be phase 1, to look to see if there are deeper questions to be asked about or deeper things to be delved into when it comes to the actual municipalization purchase and therefore municipal control, to break that down further, of El Paso Electric or its substantive production facilities on its own. That would be the first part of it. And then the second part will then delve into, okay, what are the specific actions to be taken? That would be the rest of the bulk of the chunk of change, between like $8 and $10 million. And that one would take on the order of years to fully complete in that way. So that is included. So I will say that the city of El Paso analysis on the cost of the climate charter does not include the full municipalization, the full realization of, again, that section 9.10 municipalization of El Paso Electric, but it sets the road to that as well, because essentially out of those studies is what the argument is by the city of El Paso, would come the question on what that would cost based on the methods that are deemed available and most viable, given the whole, all available efforts language that is included there.
Exactly.
Okay, so with those numbers in place and those considerations in there as well, there has been some further analysis, further article from El Paso Matters dated March 29th of this year. El Paso property tax rate could increase under climate charter, city leaders say. You did mention about there being income that is possible from this, particularly from solar generation. Now, of course, currently not possible, at the very least, if there were to be solar panels installed right now in the city of El Paso using them, because of, again, the minimum costs that are required, the interconnection fees, et cetera, that are required. So that is kind of the idea of this, therefore, beyond the investment, then to start to see results from it even before the purchase of El Paso Electric would be predicated upon that one section that we discussed about the actual removal of all fees being actually in place. That one section, 9.13, elimination of impediments to renewable energy, including taking about all fees null and void, including but not limited to interconnection fees. That would essentially be the requirement to see that part realized, then it sounds like.
Rephrase that question, I'm sorry.
So to see the actual money being made off of it, the benefits before even the purchase of El Paso Electric from, say, the creation of solar panels, it would require that section about the removal of all fees to go into effect to see that realized.
I assume so. I think there's more to it. There's lots more nuance. I think, of course, the Chamber of Commerce and of course El Paso Electric are going to imagine the worst case scenario in every scenario, right? But adopting the climate charter actually opens us up to a lot more federal grants and just regular renewable energy grants. For example, the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, has a lot of resources that cities and municipalities can be tapping into to supplement their energy grids, right? To start that process. So, of course, the oligarchs know that people are scared of their property taxes rising, as they should be. But let's be honest, the property taxes have been rising not because of city infrastructure going back to citizens, but city resources going to private hands and private interests. So that's just another fear-mongering talking point. At the end of the day, this climate charter allows us to start tapping into other funds and other sources rather than just our property tax base here. We, like I said, the IRA, there's millions of dollars, billions of dollars that could be had, and especially here in El Paso, where we have, again, so much potential to be leading not only our area, but the state. We could be tapping into that money. There's lots of grants, there's lots of foundations that are willing to help support cities. We just have to have that infrastructure ready to go looking for that, ready to be applying to that. Currently, we don't have anybody who cares about that stuff because we have an electric company that's committed to fossil fuels and committed to telling us that they want to change, but never doing it. So this will give us that opportunity to tap in those financial sources in other ways. And so sure, it would require that clause to some extent, but
Sure. Okay.
But there's an array of doors that open, when we adopt the climate charter like this.
We've talked quite at length as we're now just past the 2-hour mark for the entirety of this interview. And again, for those listening on air with us as we are presenting this today, this full interview is going to be available online on our social media outlets, either shortly after or before too long on there. So we'll have that linked along with the articles we've been talking about as well. So you can see all the details that we've been getting into, the language of the ordinance and all of those things. But we've had a lot of conversation. I mean, there have been a lot of points that have been brought up on this program for, against, or just kind of questioning what this would mean and what the impacts would be. From y'all's perspective, again, you all are some of the organizing aspects of this. You have put this forth and are very vocally proponents of this. Again, some of those websites, sunriseelpaso.org and elpasoclimate.org. We've, again, gotten into a lot of detail, but bring this back to the high level in a nutshell. For anyone that is wondering why they should support this, kind of in a nutshell, what do you say to them?
In order for something better to happen and to occur, there's a few things that need to happen before that. Number one, we need to realize that we deserve better, and we need to fathom the idea of what better looks like. And I don't think we need to tap that hard into the imagination of El Pasoans for them to recognize that we are not using solar energy the way we could be. And I don't think it takes an economist or political scientist or anything for us to realize that when we tap into that, we can actually create an economic boom. We can create a huge resource of jobs, and we can, again, be leading the state and our nation and even the world in solar energies. But of course, if you ask the people who currently profit off the way things are, of course they're going to be upset about it. Of course they're not going to want to have to share the market that they wouldn't have to compete in. Of course they're going to be upset. Hence why they're throwing so much money and throwing so much information out there to stoke fear, right? And what I want people to remember is, number one, everything that's in this climate charter are things that El Paso Electric, El Paso Water Utilities have claimed are their values. So all we are doing is asking them to commit to those values in a way that holds the community accountable and holds them accountable to the community. And so I as frustrating as it is to have to engage with such what feel like bad faith actors, I still want to call them in and say, if you care about this community, let's engage in this conversation in a much deeper way. Throwing fear and throwing, all these numbers and reports that, apparently a lot of people haven't even read, do not help the conversation, right? We need to engage in a much more meaningful way. And that's what we've been doing as a community group and organization. And 39,000 people did not sign the climate charter because they're concerned about El Paso Electric's profits or the profits of the fossil fuel industry. They signed it because they see the reality in front of them. They see days where wind is blowing beyond anything they can't even see to their neighbor's house. They see the rising price of electricity, and they see how our summers are getting hotter and drier, and they do not want what is being presented to us as an option anymore. And so we can achieve better, and we will achieve better as long as we work together. I do not want to villainize the people of El Paso Chamber of Commerce, even though I feel as though they might have been doing that to the youth. And I think we also need to remember that the youth that are taking on this fight are actually accepting responsibility for an issue that they have very little, if anything, to do with. The climate crisis that we are in today is not because of them, yet here they are working hand in hand with community to build an understanding. We've been fighting for economic justice and climate justice since 2018, 2019, and there have been people who've been doing it before us, like Veronica Carvajal, amongst others. And so I just want people to realize that, like, as much as they want to frame us as outsiders, that we don't know what we're talking about, the Moscow study, JP Morgan Chase, all these people are not from El Paso. They do not understand the nuance in our community, and they do not understand our realization that we can do better. And so I just want to encourage everybody to read the Climate Charter. It's a little long, but I think maybe beyond the word municipalization, that might be the only word people have to really Google. But it is meant to be a document that is for people to understand, much like the Constitution, right? Much like, simply worded statements that really address our values. So I encourage everybody to read it. Check out sunriseelpasotexas.org, along with Justicia Fronteriza and a lot of our other collaborative orgs.
Again, guest with us right now has been Dominic Chacon, communications coordinator with Sunrise El Paso, and also on the phone with us a little bit earlier were Veronica Carvajal, president of Justicia Fronteriza, and Christian Marquardt, communications coordinator with the El Paso Climate Charter Coalition. Again, those websites that we were mentioning for more information on directly from the organizations we've been talking about today, sunriseelpaso.org and elpasoclimate.org. And again, for the text that we are talking about when it comes to the actual climate charter, if you want to see what's on the ballot, epcountyvotes.com. And of course, don't forget the May election that this item is on the ballot for, with among many other ballot items. And we have different school boards and municipal elections in our region. There's a lot on this ballot. Early voting April 24th through May 2nd, and then election day on May 6th. So make your plan to go vote. So we've talked about a lot today, and we're going to be posting all of this, again, the full interview online. But for those who have joined us on air, we've tried to break down the most important points or bring you the most significant parts of what we talked about today. So again, Dominic, and on behalf of the other people you had with you, thank you very much for joining us here today to break this down and get in depth on it and answer some of the questions we've had here today.
No, thank you so much for giving us the time. This was a really substantive conversation, and we really appreciate that.
So that's a lot we got into, and we got to take that break to be able to hit the top of the hour now. So we'll go ahead and note up those phone lines as well. So if you want to get on the line, add your 2 cents that way. I'm sure we'll have a lot of conversation. 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. Back after this break and the top of the hour news on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
I-10 westbound at Geronimo, an earlier accident with 2 vehicles off on the left shoulder. Memorial Highway southbound from the Spur down to Montana Avenue is a 5-minute delay. George Dieter northbound at Rojas, an accident reported. Definitely seen delays in that area, especially George Dieter northbound. And Global Reach still southbound slow from the Spur down to Montana Avenue. It's a 40-minute delay. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is sponsored by Red Pilled America.
Are you tired of listening to stories that are saturated with wokeness? If you are, then you should try Red Pilled America. We tell good old-fashioned stories that align with Middle America values. Listen to Red Pilled America anywhere you get podcasts. That's Red Pilled America.
Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
Hey guys, did you know there's a generic form of Viagra that works just the same, but is 95% cheaper? And you can get it online? Just go to 4hims.com/radio. Through Hims, you'll get a free medical consultation, discreet shipping if prescribed, a 100% online process, and trusted generic alternatives to the name brands at up to 95% off. That's right. Get generic for Viagra, the same active ingredient as brand name Viagra, but for 95% less. It's the same medication, still prescribed by a licensed medical provider, but with zero copay, no expensive appointments, and no awkward face-to-face conversations. To start your free online visit, you need to go to this exclusive address, 4hims.com/radio. That's 4hims.com/radio for your free online visit. FORHIMS.com/RADIO.
Coming up on the next episode of the Tudor Dixon podcast, the one and only Shannon Bream of Fox News joins me to discuss her new book, The Love Stories of the Bible Speak. Catch the Tudor Dixon podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your
News
podcasts.
on the hour, El Paso's News Radio 690. News Radio 690 is KTSM AM El Paso, an iHeart radio station.
NBC News Radio, I'm Brian Shook. The victims of this week's deadly bank shooting in Louisville, Kentucky are being remembered. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear was among the speakers at Wednesday's community-wide prayer vigil as he encouraged hundreds of attendees to embrace love. 6 people, including the gunman, were killed at Old National Bank on Monday. Former President Trump is returning to New York City Wednesday night, a week after his historic arraignment on criminal charges. He's expected to land at LaGuardia Airport and then head over to Trump Tower. Around 9:15 a.m. Thursday, he'll head downtown for another deposition by New York Attorney General Letitia James, who's filed a $250 million lawsuit against Trump and his company. Inflation in the U.S. is slowing down.
Inflation cooled to 5% year over year in March, down from 6% in February.
NBC News' Alice Barr says the latest consumer price index report from the Labor Department shows inflation drops in both gasoline and grocery prices. Consumer prices, meanwhile, increased 5% from a year ago. That's the smallest annual gain since May of 2021. On a monthly basis, those prices edged up just 0.1% last month. A group of 69 Republican members of Congress are signing on to a brief urging an appeals court to uphold the decision of a federal judge in Texas that would halt the prescription of a widely used abortion pill.
It's a response to over 200 congressional Democrats who are lobbying for a reversal of the ruling. The House Republicans that signed on are led by August Pfluger of Texas. They argued the federal government approval of the abortion drug was unlawful. I'm Lisa Taylor.
Tornado and flash flood warnings are out for parts of South Florida. The tornado warning was issued for the Miami area earlier today. You're listening to the latest from NBC News Radio. The EPA wants nearly 70% of all new vehicles sold in the U.S. by 2032 to be all electric. White House and EPA officials are trying to achieve this by pushing new pollution standards, forcing the auto industry to sell more EVs in order to meet the requirements. With some 65,000 people living on the streets of Los Angeles County, no city is immune to the problem of homelessness.
Beverly Hills, where $3 million will buy a 2-bedroom bungalow. And last week's city council meeting featured a heated 2-hour debate about dealing with the issue and related crime. Council members did not have a solid count of the homeless population in the famous 90210 zip code, but did say that the number of tents on street corners seems to be increasing. One council member said being homeless or being an eyesore or smelling bad is not against the law. Ultimately, no solutions or mandates were approved by the council. I'm Phil Hewlett.
Students attending the public university systems in New York City and the state will soon no longer be required to be vaccinated against COVID-19. David Folk-Thomas reports.
The chancellors for both SUNY and CUNY releasing joint declarations Tuesday, saying the vaccination mandates will end at the conclusion of the spring semester. The decision comes one day after President Biden signing legislation ending the national coronavirus emergency that had been in place since March 2020. SUNY operates 64 campuses across the state, while there are 25 campuses in the city's CUNY system.
HBO Max is rebranding to just Max. Warner Brothers Discovery officially announced the new name for the streaming service as it mixes in content from Discovery Plus. Max is also launching a new pricing plan in addition to its current ad-free and ad-enabled plans. Brian Shook, NBC News Radio.
Now, your chance to win $1,000. Enter this nationwide keyword on our website. Money. That's money. Enter it now.
This report is sponsored by Red Pilled America.
Are you tired of listening to stories that are saturated with wokeness? If you are, then you should try Red Pilled America. We tell good old-fashioned stories that align with middle America values. Listen to Red Pilled America anywhere you get podcasts. That's Red Pilled America.
I'm Martin Hoke, the inventor of Navage Nasal Care, and I love Navage. I've told you about how your nose is the body's air filter, that Navage's powered suction will help flush out allergens, viruses, mucus, and germs, and that Navage will help you breathe better. But what do other people say about Navage? Like Tara, quote, "My doctor wanted me to do saline rinses for my allergies, but I've never been able to successfully use a neti pot. Navage uses suction power, so it's foolproof. There are nights when I'll have particularly bothersome allergies. I'll bust it out, and the results are immediate. It's such a relief. It's become a lifesaver," unquote. She's one of over 100,000 online reviews praising Navage. the all-natural solution trusted by over 3 million people to help you breathe better, sleep deeper, snore less, and stay healthier without drugs. Navage is available at Walmart, CVS, Walgreens, Target, Rite Aid, and online. Navage, N-A-V-A-G-E, clean nose, healthy life.
The El Paso Community Foundation supports the causes you feel passionate about here in the borderland, whether it's education, social services, arts and culture, the environment, health, or economic development. The El Paso Community Foundation has been promoting philanthropy and progress in our hometown region for more than 45 years. Make your mark with us. Start a fund today. For good, for El Paso, forever. Learn more at epcf.org. That's epcf.org.
Pray.com's Meditative Prayers podcast is the best way to bring God's perfect peace into your night. Each meditative prayer helps you focus on God, fight anxiety, sleep better, and more.
As you close your eyes, ask God to come and have fellowship with you. Open yourself to the Holy Spirit and ask Him to minister to you.
Listen to Meditative Prayers on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live, streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we're up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. And yeah, particularly keep that YouTube in mind, as that is the place, after much chicanery on the back end, where we're going to be having the full video posted today. We'll try to cross-post it in all the other locations that we can, particularly for like the YouTube and Facebook. Don't think really Twitch responds that well. But in any case, we'll have that up and available so you can see the full 2 hours and all the parts that we weren't able to bring on air for you there, including questions about eminent domain. Just to call one out, but it was kind of buried deep in another section, and we didn't end up doing like any edits to the segments that we brought you, just kind of straight clipped them up and plopped them down because, well, that's how we want to present it to you, so you all can have the knowledge, information, or at least a in-depth-er, is that a word? It's probably not. A bigger, better look than most other ways I can imagine to know, again, what the proponents and even in some cases authors of the language that is going to be on this ballot have to say about how it would work. Of course, there's a lot of other analysis out there and things going on like that. And as we usually do on this program, this is we first seek, well, at least I do anyway, first seek to understand, then to be understood. And so that's the part we're getting into now. With those phone lines open, full up pretty much immediately, even before we said it, honestly. Keep that number handy, 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. And so we'll be taking those and squeezing what we can for the rest of this hour. A couple more comments I want to bring in. Of course, Ida Beza Gardner, wave the hello and the hi. Those also dropping those likes and reacts that we do appreciate, including James Radcliffe, Ida Beza Gardner, Bernadette Bandicol, Marky Mandingo, Angel Rueda, Flaco Jimenez, Javier Maldonado, James Holmes, and Amber Banda. And I mean, okay, there are certainly things that weren't addressed in this. The purpose and the way that, again, this was like 2 hours and 11 minutes for the entire tip to tail of this interview was about the items and the discussion that's been happening around this here. So, I mean, there are other ones that have come up and other issues, other points that, and other perspectives even that were not included in this, including those that are opposed to it directly. And those will be the subject of future interviews. But again, just want to start some conversations about this. So let's go ahead and jump on the line and talk further about those. Again, keep that number in mind, 915-544-5876, 544-KTSM. We do have Raul in the Northeastern line with us right now. Raul, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Andrew. Well, I want to commend these young environmental and social justice activists and crusaders for their work. And if Veronica Carvajal is supporting them, I can feel comfortable doing the same. You know, she's awesome, and I hope she runs for mayor again. She could be great. El Paso has plutocrat, energy monopolist, economic and environmental policy. And J.B. Morgan is as old money and plutocracy and deep state and swamp creature as one can get, let me tell you. He bailed out Uncle Sam once upon a time, and he consolidated, Edison's business into General Electric, and he consolidated Andrew Carnegie's business into U.S. Steel. He supposedly was plotting a coup along with Rockefeller and Ford at a time when they thought Teddy Roosevelt was going to go. It was too much for them with his, antitrust regulations that he passed back in the day. El Paso is a dirty city. We have some of the dirtiest air among the cities of our size. And sadly, enough city council members and mayors have been amenable to the policies, proposals, and regulations of El Paso's plutocrats to get what they want at the taxpayers' expense, whether it be ballparks or water parks or trolleys or whatever they want. Tear this down, tear city council down so we can put our ballpark on it. That's plutocrat policy set by the plutocrats of El Paso. And as you know, most El Pasoans don't vote. And of the ones that vote,
Sure.
Then there's that very small minority that are really, really active, the base of the parties here. And again, it's a Democratic city, but again, the money is the money. It's the first primary that they all got to get through. J.P. Morgan was an investment banker, and he dominated corporate finance on Wall Street since the Gilded Age. And he was a driving force behind the wave of industrial consolidation in the United States spanning the 19th and early 20th century. And actually continuing to this day. Industrial consolidation is just a fancy word for monopolization. So all you lovers of capitalism, on a big scale, it tends to go towards ever smaller number of people in the business that are giants, and that's what they do. It's a big fish eats a little fish. Now, as we know, that's only about 30% of the American economy, but it's one of the driving forces. Most people work for small businesses, and most businesses are small businesses, but they're not the energy companies. They're not the electric company, the gas company, the telephone company, the pharmaceutical industry, the military industrial complex, and the arms manufacturers, and the bullet manufacturers, and the tobacco companies who get what they want by having, again, the best politicians money can buy. And I'll say this, not all politicians are bad. A lot of them are very good folks, and I know a lot of them, and I've worked for a lot of them in the past. But the thing is, the plutocrats don't have to buy everybody. They just have to buy enough of the ones who are the whores of the plutocrats. And their real god is mammon, money. It's all about money, and you can see that what's happening with Fox. And they're getting sued again for spreading lies for money, even though it hurt the country, even though it created perceptions of a false election that was stolen and precipitated a coup on this country. And so it works at the micro level too. There's a macrocosm and the microcosm, and the micro reflects the macro, and the macro affects the micro.
I'm not going to say that El Paso Electric doesn't effectively have, whether in name or not, a monopoly in town, because there is no other option. But I'm not going to necessarily follow your logic in putting that in the same place as tobacco companies. I don't think anyone's out there saying that a tobacco company or tobacco smoking is an essential service, and one that is, the way I've put it, the lifeblood of the modern world. Because if you don't have electricity, hell, there are some municipalities, not local, but I just got to say, there are some places that if you don't have those utility hookups, the location is considered not habitable, as in will not be able to get a certificate of habitation. And that's just the reality of the modern world. So that's why this is certainly an important topic. And if you got your perspective on it, that's fine. And on capitalism as a whole, I guess. But I just think that there are some practical questions that come up about this idea, this effort, this one that you've mentioned for the most part, and most often, I want to say, of this whole issue, when it comes down to the idea of municipalization. Sure, if money is no object, anything can be accomplished. But I think for a lot of people out there in that even very small voting community, which I'm hoping consistently will increase, that, okay, is money truly no object here? And we start talking about the full scope and power of the city. The fact that even like eminent domain, one of the big questions we got to, I think we got that on air yesterday. If not, it's definitely in the full interview as being one of the possibilities on the table. It opens a whole nother kettle of fish. I gotta say, a can of worms, really, to be honest with you. So I don't know if, again, I still have more that I want to get to here, but we try to go at least line by line as much as possible with some of the most substantive questions I had when it came to this item. So I hope you found it useful making the decisions. Kind of sounds like you already had that made up and that others will do so as well. So do appreciate the point in the call for the local part of it anyway. So tell you what, we got to take that next break right now. Coming out of this break, we got more callers on the line, but if you want to get on the line, don't forget that number to do so is 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. Back after this break with more Talk El Paso on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
I-10 westbound at Geronimo, an earlier accident with two vehicles off on the left shoulder. Memorial Highway southbound from the Spur down to Montana Avenue is a 5-minute delay. George Dieter northbound at Rojas, an accident reported. Definitely seen delays in that area, especially George Dieter northbound. And Global Reach still southbound slow from the Spur down to Montana Avenue. It's a 40-minute delay. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is sponsored by the Tudor Dixon Podcast.
Coming up on the next episode of the Tudor Dixon Podcast, why is the left so eager to push the trans agenda on our kids? Don't miss the eye-opening episode with Yaku Boyens. Catch the Tudor Dixon Podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
Hey guys, did you know there's a generic form of Viagra that works just the same, but is 95% cheaper? And you can get it online? Just go to 4hims.com/radio. Through Hims, you'll get a free medical consultation, discreet shipping if prescribed, a 100% online process, and trusted generic alternatives to the name brands at up to 95% off. That's right. Get generic for Viagra, the same active ingredient as brand name Viagra, but for 95% less. It's the same medication, still prescribed by a licensed medical provider, but with zero copay, no expensive appointments, and no awkward face-to-face conversations. To start your free online visit, you need to go to this exclusive address, 4hims.com/radio. That's 4hims.com/radio for your free online visit. FORHIMS.com/RADIO.
In this week's Marketers Report, Raja Manar, Chief Marketing and Communications Officer of MasterCard, talks about measurement.
Measuring Sonic and Sonic branding and Sonic initiatives across the board, the principles of measurement are the same, but the parameters that you measure are different. We measured, and what we find is our investment is paying for itself in oodles. We have been partnering with iHeart across multiple platforms, both for brand enhancement as well as for performance marketing. I think the cut-through of the message and the recall of the brand are much higher. Also, it has been very beneficial for us to integrate some of our campaigns into the native content of iHeart. It has been a very nice partnership, and it continues to be very strong into the future.
As the #1 audio company, iHeartMedia gives marketers access to the audiences, conversations, trusted influencers, insights, and data you need to grow. Go to iHeartResults.com for more.
Here's football star Tony Romo for Skechers Max Cushioning Footwear.
You know when you go to your kid's game and you have to sit on those uncomfortable, super hard bleachers? That's how I feel now when I wear regular shoes. Why? Because once I started wearing Skechers Max Cushioning, I've been spoiled with how amazing extra cushioning feels. It's like going to sit on those hard bleachers and someone stuck a big cushy pillow on them. Because Skechers maxed out the cushioning with a thick, comfy slice of super light Ultra-Go cushioning for a soft, pillowy feel with every step. And the comfort doesn't end there. Max Cushioning also has Skechers air-cooled Goga Mat insoles, and they're machine washable and very affordable. These definitely won't max out your budget, so don't settle for inferior cushioning. Treat yourself to maximum cushion with Skechers Max Cushioning.
You heard Tony Romo. Now feel the difference extra cushioning can make for yourself with ultra-comfortable, machine-washable Skechers Max Cushioning footwear. See all the fashionable styles of Max Cushioning for men and women at a Skechers store, Skechers.com, or wherever stylish footwear is sold.
News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Oh, so many ways you can get at us, including on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages. A lot of people tuning in, chiming in over there, including a constant refrain, and from a few people here anyway, the whole idea of Great Reset or you'll own nothing and be happy about it, which just, I don't buy it. Like, I'm never going to buy that concept and be happy with it. About the only, I think I gamed this out one time years ago, that if you have like several million in stocks, that if you want to avoid paying the most taxes, I mean, yeah, you could end up renting, but I mean, then you're also then paying rent, those kind of things. So, I mean, there's no real getting away from it. But yeah, the idea of just, oh no, I won't own anything. Yeah, no, miss me with that. Anyway, some of the comments coming in. Derek Grant saying Austin has municipal power and they still use coal. Interesting point there. I'm not too familiar with them. Also concerns about property tax, among other things. Sean Gardner also saying, if every power plant in El Paso shut down, El Paso will still have dirty air. There's no magic wall running along the border that stops smog from burning tires in the south from coming to El Paso. I mean, there is that whole international border thing going on, among other things, and just a lot of other commentary about different parts of this. So we'll continue that conversation. Let's go back to some of those phone lines now. Again, full up at the moment, and I'm going to guess that's going to be the way it is through the end of the week, given how we have definitely delved into in depth a very big issue that y'all have been wanting to talk about. Just keep that number handy, 915-544-5876, 544-KTSM. We do have Andrew on the west side with us right now. Andrew, thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you very much.
Sure thing. What's on your mind?
Interestingly enough, one of my friends who supports Proposition K asked me the other day if I'm not, don't I care about clean air and clean water? I responded to him by saying, yes, you can start by extinguishing your cigarette. You're polluting my lungs.
Sure, personal pollution is definitely still a thing.
Yes. But anyway, I can't help but responding to what your guest said. He says he does not want to, I believe villainize the Chamber of Commerce.
Or the essentially opponents in general is how I took that part of the phrase, but wants to invite them to the conversation was the gist of what he said at that point, I think.
Yes, well, that's exactly what he's doing, because I really haven't seen much empirical data on their part, okay? This, what people need to realize is the long-term effects of this. They're talking about, yesterday your guest said, hold industry accountable, if I'm not mistaken.
That sounds about right without having the exact quote in front of me.
Okay, well, with that in mind, how can we ask, or how can we seek to have outside industry invest in El Paso, or even establish some sort of factory here?
I get what you're getting at there, and let me just put it this way, that regardless of the direction, I mean, again, there's different directions that we could definitely take with, electricity generation, how we handle power here. Is this the right way to do about that? I'm not convinced. But what I got to say is that if reliability isn't a part of that, I mean, we've been insanely lucky to not be on the rest of the problems that have been seen in Texas over the past couple of winters, early starts of the year, those times that they've been having not the fun with, and we've had basically nothing to do with in these recent times because we're not on that part of the grid. And that just kind of is a case in point of reliability. If that's not the core of what is happening with electrical generation and the concepts being put into it, even if you're not actively saying, well, we're going to cut off power, some out there are saying that that's a part of this, and I end up disagreeing with that. But yeah, if just making sure that when you turn on the light switch, the lights come on as long as you are hooked up to the system and not on your own jerry rig kind of thing, then we're just signing up for, third world status. It does not make sense, and that will definitely put a kibosh on a whole lot of things.
Well, yes, that's true. Well, what a lot of people don't realize, remember, if the city government is required to install solar panels and solar generated equipment on their buildings, you, like your IT department, you have to have techs. You also have to have techs to maintain this solar generation system.
That's very true. I mean, it's its own complexities, and I've done some study on this. I kind of dabble with the idea of it, and it's not nowhere no feasible. No one from a solar company try to call me based off this is what I'm saying. Anyway, point is that these systems that go into it, making sure you have the right gauge of wire, that you are having the right charge controller systems and the right power diverters. All these kind of things are decently complicated, and even more than IT you're talking about here. I mean, sure, there's electricity involved in IT, and you touch the wrong thing, and you could definitely cause some damage to yourself and or others or other things. But I mean, immediately when you're talking about power generation, you're talking about volumes of it, and then also how it's stored and how it's fed in. So this is not just I've done plenty of wiring in my day when it comes to Ethernet, and this is definitely a whole different level. I got to say that.
Yes, sir. Well, in talking to a couple of friends of mine that are techs and engineers, let me tell you. Okay, if you have a 100 megawatt solar farm, that's enough to generate about electricity to about 164,000 homes. Okay, that would be a solar farm of approximately 6 square miles. And El Paso has around 321,000 housing units.
Yeah, I mean, the size considerations that come up with this has been brought up by some others as well. I mean, I know there have been some fanciful kind of ideas. If we had this one 100 square mile area in the middle of the Sahara, it would be enough to power whole swaths of a continent or that kind of a thing. But yeah, where these end up getting positioned, and part of it, a good example that can be maybe not easily seen, but you drive along Spur 601 in between 54 and the border highway, and you can kind of see over near the 1st Armored Division headquarters, their whole, solar farm that they have out that way that's been installed for the better part of a decade, if not longer at this point. And the entire purpose of that has to have a dedicated backup for the operations of the headquarters of the 1st Armored Division. And it's, maybe not totally an order of magnitude more, but several times the footprint of the building itself, just kind of as a short example.
Correct. Another thing, these people talk about climate change and this, that, or the other. Well, folks, just to let you know, solar panels increase the ambient temperature around them by about 3 to 6 degrees, and I'm talking the 3 to 6 degrees increase of ambient temperature. That can be quite a bit depending on the area.
I mean, there's a reason I've seen an increasing amount of solar panels in my neighborhood and in a lot of places. I've had multiple calls, so please don't also add to the call anyone by trying to call me about solar panel. We're not interested at this time. But even one actually showed up at my door, and I was starting to talk about these are the things I'm aware from El Paso Electric. How do you say that this works with what y'all do? It was an interesting time. Let me just put it that way. Point is that the way you see them installed is not directly on the roof. There is the concept of solar tiles that is kind of gradually coming up, but the way the commercial installers are coming to you, they're not talking about roof replacement. They're talking about installing of solar panels, and you'll notice there's a gap there. And also, just think about the materials that these are made of. I mean, yes, there's glass and, silicon wiring, all those kind of things, but they're mostly black because they are interested in the absorption of it, among other things. They're not exactly, there's also the more passive solar, the heat exchanger part of it that can also be done. But you start talking about black stuff and black painted things in El Paso, and we all just know that gets hot.
Yes, sir. And one of the final things I wanted to say is, no one is in business to lose money. People have to realize, and I'm addressing it to these, young kids that want to change the world, this climate agenda people. Once again, nobody is in business to lose money. There are people that depend on the corporations that they work for, their 401ks, their retirement, their Roth IRAs. Hey, they have to put food on the table, guys. And this is, once you start running people out of town and start putting more stressors on them, hey, it's going to affect the bottom line. And guess what? They may not be able to hire the techs or the individuals in order to operate these green new energy saving efforts that you guys want.
I mean, there are a lot of logistical factors that come into this. The idea of there being full control of it. I mean, just given the kerfuffle that we're having over something like the city manager, among other things right now, and then start thinking about when it comes to basic reliability of services within your home. And I'm not sure that's a two great taste that tastes great together kind of situation. So the whole debate on how that could happen is certainly a very important one. But again, I'll just bottom line it. If reliability and making sure that the lights stay on for everyone who wants them on is not a core part of any implementation, either with this or of the general idea going forward, it's a losing equation.
Yes, very true. Well, also concerning what Raul said about J.P. Morgan and Rockefeller and Carnegie. Well, these guys may have not been the best characters in the world. They did have their faults, but they launched this nation into one of the biggest industrial powers in the world, which during the last century, remember, because of our industrial might, we were able to defeat our enemies in 2 world wars, and we saved the entire European continent and the people in the Pacific area from oppression, along with our allies.
And industrial production has been incredibly important and, again, has an increasing focus in other ways right now, let's just say, as we're on the hopefully not cusp, but definitely feels like we might need to be near a precipice of certain conflicts. Actually having that capability, producing stuff, does feel like it's increasingly, and there are more alarm bells being sounded than even just me mentioning it here, so I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking about this. But yeah, industrial production is important. So again, just for our local area, reliability and having that baseline to be able to have those kind of stuff built, made, produced, even just, directed from here, monumentally important. That's the only way I can think to put it.
Yes, sir. Andrew, I've talked too much. I turn the mic back over to you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Sure thing. Thanks for the point in the call. You have a good one there. And with that, I think we got time for at least one more quick call on the line. We do have Joe on the west side with us right now. Joe, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you. As it relates to your caller, or not caller, your guest person, I was thinking that, and I tell you the truth, I've dealt with municipalities, state, and local and federal governments in doing environmental projects. And I did it in 2 countries. And the fact is that when you're dealing with these government officials and you have a sketchy statement like they do, this amendment or proposition, it's very sketchy. It's very open-ended. It's not very specific as to what they're going to do or what it entails, or it seems like it was written by an 8th grader. Just taking Wikipedia stuff, and put it there. Because in dealing with government officials, or bureaucrats, what's going to happen, especially in some countries, and in this country too, I guess, is that they're going to change. The bureaucrats that are there now, or the politicians that are there now, may not be there tomorrow.
Sure.
So they may interpret it a different way, and they may say, "Hey, these guys from that other party didn't know what they were doing. We're going to do it the right way." And if you have to be very specific, detailed as to what you want to do, because it's going to change. And listening to this young guy, I guess he's a young guy. He doesn't know what he's not very professional. First of all, because he didn't explain anything. He was lecturing us. And then, like Andrew said, he was alleging that the debate, during the debate, or while he's having this debate with other people, he doesn't explain or give facts. He says they're lying, they're fabricating, they're trying to line their pockets. Well, guess what? Guess what the solar industry is doing? They're trying to line their pockets too. Solar energy, and working in the environmental sector for a long time, I can tell you, solar energy is not that great. It has a long way to go. The technology isn't there yet that it'll provide the electricity that you need. Try those solars that lights that they sell at the general store, at
Yeah, okay, sure.
I mean, how long do they stay lit? How much light do they give? Not very much. We're far away from being the perfect solar panel. And then, like Andrew was saying, they affect the environment around you. And then when you have to get rid of them, guess what? It's polluting the ground. The thing about it is that they're very costly. They're very expensive. And most of the people here in El Paso can't afford to fix their roofs. You go around town and you see all these bad roofs all over the place. All these homes with roofs that are falling apart. I mean, why? They can't afford to fix them. The taxes are too high. So who's going to buy all these solar panels? I mean, you're going to have a revolution. People are going to start revolting and say, "Hey, I don't want to pay for that." But people that are lining their pockets, which are the solar panel people, industry, wants to, they're going to force them to fix their roof, which is going to cost, I don't know, maybe 1/3 of what the solar panels cost. I mean, solar panels are not cheap. They're expensive. And you have to pay for them for 30 years. Do people know that? No, you're going to be paying them for 30 years. And they tell you, oh, you're going to make your money back. No, you don't. You come out even maybe, but that's it. You're not going to make your money. You're not going to make any money on that. So the lie that this guy is promoting, or not giving us the right facts, because he probably doesn't know this. He's a young kid. He doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't really know details of what the overall project entails. Well, I think that's it for me.
Yeah. Well, sure thing. Well, thanks for the point in the call. Do appreciate it.
Thank you.
I will say that on the kind of point you were on there about specificity, I prefer in general, because they seem to work out better regardless of what the subject of the law or legal issue may be. Specificity tends to work out better in the long run because, just kind of like you're describing there, if it's not subject to the vagaries of or the whims of those who are therefore holding the reins of power, as opposed to being these are the specific things that you can or cannot do. I mean, not to put words in the mouth, but to paraphrase, part of what some of these proponents are saying is about that these are goals. These are aspirational. I mean, literally the one about municipalization is about all available efforts. And that's why some of the questions that are certainly in the full interview, which again, just to mention that, going to be up here within about an hour now over on the YouTube is when it's scheduled to finally be able to go live, that you can see through it all yourself here, and we'll post it over on our various social medias and as the ways that we can so that you all see it. And we have in that also posted all the links to the legislation, the charter amendment text itself, the details of the voting information from EP County Votes, and all the various different articles that were being referenced as we went through this discussion. So trying to be kind of your one stop for all of the, well, at least what we were getting into on this. There's more than we could even get into probably before we got to the election itself, to be honest with you. But again, do appreciate the point. Let's take that break now. Coming out of this break, we got more calls, we got more comments, and we got more of everything we're going to try to squeeze in for the end of the show. I think we're going to primarily focus on calls tomorrow. Let's just say that, y'all. So back after this break with more Talk El Paso. Keep that number handy, 915-544-5876, 544-KTSM. Back after this break with more Talk El Paso on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Hello, I'm Erica Castillo with this KFOX 14 news update. A man is now booked into the El Paso County Jail in connection to the murder of a woman in El Paso who went missing 2 weeks ago. 34-year-old Christopher Paul Maya was arrested yesterday at a Walmart in the Northeast by the U.S. Marshals Lone Star Fugitive Task Force. The 32-year-old's body was found in the area of Red Sands. Police say the last contact with Michelle Morales Nakaza was the night of March 27th at a Baskin-Robbins on Edgemere. Police mentioned Morales Nakaza doesn't own a vehicle and was possibly picked up in a white older Toyota Camry. And Mexico's top immigration official will face criminal charges in the fire that killed 40 migrants in Juarez 2 weeks ago. Federal prosecutors say he was remiss in not preventing the disaster despite earlier indications of problems at the detention centers. It follows repeated calls from within Mexico and Central American nations not to stop the case at the 5 low-level official guards and a Venezuelan migrant already facing homicide charges in the case. I'm Erica Castillo with this KFOX 14 news update.
News Radio 690. Traffic all day.
I-10 westbound at Zaragoza, an accident is blocking the right lane. You could expect delays. Backup has already started to go back to Don Haskins Drive. Expect slowing on the 10 westbound as you get inside the loop. I-10 westbound at Geronimo, an earlier crash there is the left lane block. There's no backup. There is a backup on the I-10 eastbound from Cotton to Paisano. It's a 15-minute delay. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
From the KFOX 14 Severe Weather Center, I'm Chief Meteorologist Brad Montgomery. After a very warm one for our Wednesday, lows for a Thursday morning in the 50s to lower 60s, so a little milder tomorrow morning. And then for tomorrow afternoon, the story becomes the wind. We'll see southwest winds 30 to 40 miles per hour for your Thursday, high around 84 degrees. Windy and cooler for your Friday, high around 76. The good news is less windy for the weekend. From the KFOX 14 Severe Weather Center, I'm Chief Meteorologist Brad Montgomery.
This report is sponsored by the Tudor Dixon Podcast.
Coming up on the next episode of the Tudor Dixon Podcast, the one and only Shannon Bream of Fox News joins me to discuss her new book, The Love Stories of the Bible Speak. Catch the Tudor Dixon Podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Martin Hoke, the inventor of Navage Nasal Care, and I love Navage. I've told you about how your nose is the body's air filter, that Navage's powered suction will help flush out allergens, viruses, mucus, and germs, and that Navage will help you breathe better. But what do other people say about Navage? Like Haley, quote, Navage is the best thing I bought. I love it. My nose feels so clear now and I can breathe. I've been struggling with a stuffy nose for weeks. I bought Navage and it's amazing. Or this one. I use Navage every night, could not imagine life without it. I have 5 cats, and before I found Navage, I was a clogged mess. Now I breathe so much better, unquote. Those are 2 of over 100,000 online reviews praising Navage, the all-natural solution trusted by over 3 million people to help you breathe better, sleep deeper, snore less, and stay healthier without drugs. Navage is available at Walmart, CVS, Walgreens, Target, Rite Aid, and online. Navage, N-A-V-A-G-E, clean nose, healthy life.
Coming up on the next episode of the Tudor Dixon Podcast, the one and only Shannon Bream of Fox News joins me to discuss her new book, The Love Stories of the Bible Speak. Catch the Tudor Dixon Podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This report is sponsored by the Tudor Dixon Podcast.
Stay tuned and stay informed with News Radio 690, KTSM, an iHeart radio station.
Next Thursday, you will be caught in an extreme flash flood.
Disasters don't plan ahead, but you can. Talk to your loved ones about making an emergency plan. Get started today at ready.gov/plan. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we're up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. A lot of conversation, primarily about our interview from today. I mean, there's some stuff otherwise going on, including a bomb threat that apparently was cleared over at the new William Beaumont Army Hospital. At least one listener that sent me that information. Thankfully, they were okay. Appears to have been cleared up now, but still be cautious around that area. But, Prop K and everything coming with it is definitely one of the... It's taking up a lot of the air in the room whenever it comes to political discussion these days. So we'll still taking those points and calls. So you don't have to call about that, but I'd be surprised if someone doesn't. Anyway, getting back to those phone lines now, we do have Frankie and Messia on the line with us right now. Frankie, thanks for joining us.
All right. I am seriously annoyed. No. I'm ticked. I heard that Mr. Ortiz fella, relative to Proposition K. Now, let me just say this right out of the box. I support the whole concept of Proposition K, the climate thing, the water thing, and the municipalization aspect. But wait a minute here. Nothing that he said had any kind of a thought process that said that we here in Doña Ana County, Messia, and there's about 3 or 4 other counties that get supplied by El Paso Electric that has any at all input into this May the 6th upcoming election. There is something wrong with that. This is the Boston Tea Party. This is taxation without representation kind of stupid nonsense. This is outrageous. Now I want to say one more thing.
Okay.
If there's nothing going to be done about this, where somebody's going to say how we are going to be able to provide some kind of input, I am going to send a very, very heavy, very intelligently constructed email to my district rep here in Doñana County in this specific area, Michaela Lara Cadena, and I'm going to let her know what the heck's going on. Now, maybe she's paying attention, maybe she's not, but by God, by the gods of old, I am tonight going to put together an email to let her know, and she can share this with the rest of her compadres and the rest of the. This is outrageous. We don't have any input. That's my point. This is outrageous.
I mean, I would frankly encourage you to do that anyway, because involvement with your elected officials is a good thing. But particularly on this, I mean, okay, there were some things. I'm not sure if we totally got them on air yesterday, but mostly in terms of like water supply and those impacts on, say, southern New Mexico and other parts also outside of the actual county, among other things, and the city of El Paso. But let me just say this, that no, there will not be any vote on Prop K outside of the city of El Paso. That much I can guarantee you, because that's not how it's set up.
Oh, okay. All right. Now, wait a minute. No, maybe I'm missing something here. Well, I don't know. I mean, somebody's got to help me out with this.
Sure.
We are receiving power services, if you will, from El Paso Electric in El Paso. And they want to do this specific to the whole Proposition K thing. Now, wait a minute. If we're receiving services from Texas, El Paso Electric, then where can we come up and say, yeah, we like it? Oh, no, we don't like it. This is something wrong with this, Andrew. This is not the American way.
I mean, I don't have a good answer for you on that one, because, I mean, this is an item that is being put forth by the city of El Paso, and therefore would take effect into the city of El Paso. And so I guess potentials might be if there were to be, say, a spinoff of, and this is just completely spitballing here, I have no reason to particularly point to that this would actually happen, but maybe a spinoff of the operations that happen in southern New Mexico, a different company coming in. But I mean, we're talking about there being specific actions happening within one municipality that will affect others. I mean, you are right about that part.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. I don't know if you're going to get this Mr. Ortiz fellow on again, but I'm serious as a heart attack. I would be in favor of a stop-action lawsuit specific to this until they can answer the question about how we in New Mexico, those counties that I just mentioned, are going to have some kind of input to this particular vote that you guys are going to have. That's my particular point. I'm so ticked you can't get over it. I'm ticked.
Well, okay, I would, again, certainly encourage you to, maybe not with the total ticketness, but write the letter to your representative and have that conversation with them, because, I mean, this being on people's radars, as much as, yeah, the vote is going to be within the city of El Paso, but it certainly will have impacts if you just, I mean, you go to El Paso Electric, and ironically enough, it's also been coming up, the whole smart meter discussion that shows the actual range of the services that are given in our region, which includes not even just, you know, the immediate southern parts of southern New Mexico, but up into it and, like, you know, Hatch and beyond. So there's a lot of territory that is going to be dealt with when it comes to this. So making more people aware of those potential impacts is certainly an important thing. So yeah, I would recommend you write your email.
Oh, you better believe it. I am doing that as soon as I get off this phone, eat my dinner for my wife. I'm getting on my computer, and I'm going to craft that email. I'll let you know what she says. But this is outrageous. This is not the way it's supposed to happen. It's not the American way. Good grief. That's the end I want to say about that.
All right, fair enough. Well, thank you for the point in the call. Do appreciate it.
All right, take care, Andrew.
And with that, I think we got time for at least one more call. Let's see what we can get to right now. We do have Jerry in Northwest on line with us right now. Jerry, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for squeezing me in there, Andrew. I appreciate it. And guess what? I agree with Frankie from the CIA.
Okay.
You're right, Frankie. You're right, Frankie. This is basically taxation without representation, although it's not being taxed. They're going to control your power on El Paso without you having any input. And it's going to destroy a lot of businesses. Okay, with this interview, the young man you had on there, Mr. Chacon,
Yes.
and it's Chacon, Frankie, not he said something else.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Electricity or the availability to electricity is not a right. He was wrong on that. I want him to show me in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights where it says you have a right to electrical power. He can't do that. So that's a lie. So he's lying himself. And before the 1950s, majority of the United States didn't even have electricity. They were still burning coal oil lamps and using coal in a wood stove or a coal stove or a fireplace to heat their house. Before then, so it's only been 70 years since we've been using electricity. All right, item 2, $150 million. Will only start the panel that you guys are talking about for this Proposition K. That's not going to pay for El Paso Electric.
No, it certainly would not.
And you discussed that with them. But just to make it clear, $150 million won't even buy one generating station, much less the 5 or 6 they got going around the city, plus all the power lines that go with it, plus all the substations. $150 million. They spend $150 million for transformers, just transformers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to make that clear briefly, that $150 million is the city's estimate on the total cost of everything but the municipalization, but it does include about $10-12 million for a study in the municipalization, just to make that part clear.
Yeah, and then they're going to spend $150 million paying lawyers because El Paso Electric's going to fight it. What does the Fourth Amendment say about taking over people's property?
Unreasonable search and seizures and, securing your effects, etc.
Yes. Okay, let's see. What was that? There's an eminent domain portion of it where they have to pay maybe I'm looking at the Fifth Amendment. They have to pay for the property that they seize through eminent domain. They got to give them the value of it.
Sure.
And you're talking, I don't know what it was sold for to people that just bought it, but
$4 billion and change.
$150 million.
Oh yeah, no, it's an order of magnitude different. Yeah, it was about $4 billion and change for the sale to the the Infrastructure Investment Fund, run by J.P. Morgan.
Yes. So, and that was when did they buy it? They bought it 2 years ago.
Give or take. I actually don't remember the exact date on that offhand, but yes, in about that range.
Okay, multiply that by 0.07, correction, because of inflation.
Okay.
All righty. Rehiring of the electrical staff, El Paso Electric staff. Are they planning on laying everybody off and then rehiring people?
That's a question that I don't think can really be answered, because the actual plan for what it would look like and what that would be, I mean, the way they put municipalization forth was in a few different ways of even just having more indigenous generated electricity, like the city installing solar panels, etc. But I will say that, I mean, what they're saying, all options are on the table, including just the lock, stock, and barrel purchase of it, if that were to be feasible, or the, kind of like with eminent domain or other powers they mentioned that the city would have of taking it over. That would be a question I would have as well.
Yeah, and are you going to find the expertise? Are they going to pay the same pay rate that they're going to get now from El Paso Electric? And what happens if they don't come back? Who are you going to find to take their place? Okay, next question. Besides that one,
sure.
If you're so upset about El Paso Electric, and why don't you start your own electrical company? Not you, Andrew. I'm talking about these people.
Sure. No, I get you.
Sunrise.
I mean, that's a whole other discussion, frankly, here, because about that, what do you do? How do you? I know there are places in this country that have multiple power generation areas and companies that do that, but how the logistics work on, say, if they go down the same power lines, or they have to have separate ones and basically re-infrastructure, that's something I'm not 100% on. I'll be honest with you.
Well, in other parts of Texas, they can choose their electric company.
Sure.
They have the ability to choose who's going to provide them power, and it does go down the same power lines.
Okay.
So why don't they start their own power company, generating company? Next question. Okay, or comment. These people are playing on the fears of people. The question you had Ben asked to tell you about how they went about getting all these scientists to get to 98%. Last week he did that.
Yeah, give or take.
Yes. Well, that wasn't addressed that you've seen, and he was right. There was a person that used to sit in for Rush Limbaugh. I can't remember his name. He's from the Northeast, and he's British. And he was continually in the colonial Northeast, like up in Rhode Island or something like that, New Hampshire or something like that. Mark something. Okay. He wrote a book on it. They took him to court in Europe to force him to stop selling that book. And he proved that what Ben said was correct.
RJ saying Mark Stein or Mark's Stein.
Yeah.
Spelled it some that way.
Like that. Yes. And people need to look that up also. They are willing to go to take people to court to stifle their First Amendment rights, writing a book to cover their lies and their thing on taking money from everybody else because of the fear that they're putting on people's minds with all this climate change.
Well, tell you what, Jerry, we're going to end up having to leave it there because we are about out of time here for this show. But tell you what, Jerry did suggest this before we were off air about, I think we're going to talk about some local things, but we're going to dedicate a lot more time to the calls, particularly on this for tomorrow. Not a total free-for-all Friday or necessarily a throwdown Thursday, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that want to get on this. So tell you what, thanks for the point in the call, Jerry. We're going to have to end the show there for today because we are out of time here for this program. So I want to thank everyone that did tune in, call in, comment, participate in the show. We're out of time. So we'll talk more about what we got coming up for you tomorrow on the program. So as we do every Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 p.m. Until then, until next time, stay safe out there. Look twice for motorcycles when out on the road and have a great evening, y'all. We'll see you tomorrow.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
El Paso Fire's responding to an accident. Northbound Wrestler at Trans Mountain. I-10 eastbound at Zaragoza. Earlier crash cleared. All lanes back open. Slow traffic on the 54 southbound McCombs to Trans Mountain. 7-minute delays. I-10 eastbound from Wyoming to Hawkins is a 13-minute delay. And it's still slow on the spur. Stop and go. Liberty Expressway eastbound from the Gateway to the Loop. 5-minute delays. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is sponsored by the Tudor Dixon Podcast.
Coming up on the next episode of the Tudor Dixon Podcast, the one and only Shannon Bream of Fox News joins me to discuss her new book, The Love Stories of the Bible Speak. Catch the Tudor Dixon Podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Paid for by government.com.
Did you hear? A recent stash of $20 gold Liberty coins from the 1800s has been found. These gorgeous gold coins are as bright and shiny as the day they were struck in the late 1800s, and less than 50 of these gold coins are available. Coin experts are calling this gold find an incredible opportunity. Call 1-800-495-6468, and you are guaranteed a $20 gold Liberty coin minted by the U.S. Mint in the 1800s. But with extremely limited availability, you must call now. These gold Liberty coins from the 1800s are still in uncirculated condition. That is history you can hold in your hand. To learn more, call 1-800-495-6468. Call now, and you'll receive a free American Coin Collector's Bonus Package, a $75 value free with every order. Call 1-800-495-6468 now to secure your $20 gold Liberty coins dated from the 1800s before they sell out. That's 1-800-495-6468.
Find dinner inspiration and stream BarbaQuest at beeflovingtexans.com.
Here's football star Tony Romo for Skechers Max Cushioning Footwear.
You know when you go to your kid's game and you have to sit on those uncomfortable, super hard bleachers? That's how I feel now when I wear regular shoes. Why? Because once I started wearing Skechers Max Cushioning, I've been spoiled with how amazing extra cushioning feels. It's like going to sit on those hard bleachers and someone stuck a big cushy pillow on them. Because Skechers maxed out the cushioning with a thick, comfy slice of super light Ultra-Go cushioning for a soft, pillowy feel with every step. And the comfort doesn't end there. Max Cushioning also has Skechers air-cooled Goga Mat insoles, and they're machine washable and very affordable. you definitely won't max out your budget. So don't settle for inferior cushioning. Treat yourself to maximum cushion with Skechers Max Cushioning.
You heard Tony Romo. Now